Hello and welcome to Axumawian Media. My name is Melat Haftu and I'll be hosting Inside Tigray, a show that will give you a Tigrayan perspective on global, continental and statewide affairs. Please tune in, listen, engage and participate for a constructive and insightful discussion. Hello and welcome to Inside Tigray on Axumawian Media. We have a great guest today, Hailu Kebede. He will be joining us today for our segment. Hailu Kebede is the head of the Department of Foreign Affairs in Salsai Wayane, a party that was established to represent the people of Tigray. Hailu, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking out some time to have a conversation with us today.
Thank you, Melat, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I know you've been very busy. We've been speaking as well. You've been touring in Europe. You've gone to many countries, which I thought that was a really great move. Especially where we are as a society today politically. I think that kind of discussion with the political elite is very important. And I wish other parties had the opportunity to do what you did, Hailu. So I think that was much appreciated by much of the European diaspora who I've heard were really impressed and really digesting a lot of the things that you were speaking about. I even went ahead and watched some of your panels, especially the one in Sweden that was online. So that was really great. And, it really had me thinking a lot. So these kind of engagements, I think, from our political elite, I think they really do a lot of justice for our political kind of environment after Tigray. So thank you for that. So just to quickly get your thought about that, how was that for you? Was that something that you feel like was needed? Do you feel like there was a lot of a gap between the diaspora and the Tigray political elite? What was beneficial from doing that?
Well, actually, I was surprised because over the last 50 years, the diaspora and in fact the Tigrayan society has been hearing one voice. The political environment or the sphere has been totally monopolized by one political party. So when I go to Sweden, especially in Stockholm for the first time, yes, there were some resistance. There were some uncomfortable conditions, but to your surprise and to my surprise, there were a lot of determined, especially the youth. They were determined. They want to hear a different voice. They want to hear what we can say, what we can offer to our people, what we have, what we can deliver. The message that I carry, the party's message. So I was quite surprised by the determination of especially the youth. I am grateful. I am honored. This is a historic moment not only in my personal opinion or in my political party's opinion, but this is historic when you see into the Tigrayan political sphere as a whole. So it was historic. It was a very good tour, I would say.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So just tell us a bit about your party, just briefly. When was your party established? What political program does your party hold?
Well, our party was officially established in 2019. Prior to that, for over 5 years, we have been discussing on the situation in Tigray and overall in Ethiopia as well. We know as Tigrayans, we were not in the right direction. We have been off road for more than 30 years, especially after the downfall of the Derg, because there was no roadmap for Tigray. We know that for sure. And there was this active discussion, especially with the coming of the social media. We started to gather some like-minded people. So we have to establish some kind of a core, organizing force for our party. Before even deciding whether to establish a political party or not, what we did was we just wrote down what we think is good for Tigray, and then we said this document as the interest of Tigray, or in Tigrinya Rabha Tigray, and then we wanted to execute this interest. So how can this be achieved? So we have 10 options, I think we had at the time. We were thinking of establishing a media, an advocacy group, a think tank group, a civic organization, and so on and so on. But the 10th option was holding the power, or Sultan Mu'tar in Tigrinya, what we call it. So establishing a political party was the 10th option, in fact. So we went to establish a political party. But before even establishing the political party, what we did was, if these documents that we have written can be incorporated whether to the TPLF program or to the Arana political party program, because these were the only parties in Tigray at the time. So we brought TPLF's and Arana's political program into our table, and we compare it with our document. And we said, no, we cannot incorporate our document into these political programs. So we went on to establish the political party. In our political program, what we said is, for example, in rights, we prioritize group rights as far as we are in Ethiopia, because we are a nation. Tigray is a nation, and we have a national interest. We have a group interest. So if we are going to incorporate group interest better than the individual interest, or if we have to prioritize between the individual rights and group rights, we have to choose an ideology that can incorporate these thoughts. And economically, we can say Al-Sawiyan Tigray's political program is a liberal, but when you look into some of the political programs, because we have this group rights in our mind, we said that social democracy is way more, near to our political program. So we said we are a social democrats, but social democracy in Tigray can only establish it fully once you have accumulated wealth and so on and so on. That's what our also, oppositions asks, are we going to distribute, poverty? That's what they say sometimes. What we are saying is we are going to create wealth with the experiences of the early social democracy status throughout Nordic countries, Germany, and so on and so on. We have a lot of experience, wealth creation, not only wealth distribution, but we can create wealth as well, because we are going to use the early stage of social democracy. So this is our ideology, and our political program and economic program are, they fit to some extent to the Tigrayan society, because we believe social democracy is, for example, highly attached to the Tigrayan cause, because we have social justice systems that have been there for thousands of years. We have been one of the most, ancient societies, but with solidarity, as we call it, Beherawi Simrat, or national solidarity, that we have in Tigray. You look over the last 2 years what happened in Tigray, and you can see that there is social democracy as well, because those who have something share their food today, without knowing that they might not have a dinner for tomorrow, but they just share it for today. You can see what the diaspora has been doing over the last 2 years. They have a lot of financial burden over the last years because of the COVID and so on, and some issues as well, national issues in their host countries. But they have been giving whatever they had. So I think this connects well with our society, and that's why we chose this. So this is what I can say about our political party in the very beginning.
Okay, so this idea of social democracy, so does that mean your party believe fundamentally that the ideas of the previous kind of system that the TPLF had adopted, revolutionary democracy, is that something that has been achieved? Is that something that you think is yet to be achieved, or is that something that you feel was never right for Tigray as a region?
Revolutionary democracy was never the right choice for the Tigrayan society. It was just a Marxist-Leninist ideology that has been imposed by some ideological fanatics within the TPLF over our society. It was against the values and assets of our society. So it has been imposed by these ideological fanatics. So it has nothing to do with our society.
Okay, but do you not think that maybe like the Qadamai Wayane movement, the first Wayane movement, was sort of in line with that kind of democracy?
I wouldn't say that was also feudal society. It was also feudal Tigray, but there has been some elements in that movement. For example, when you look into the Kanchi Sraat of the Wajirat area, when you look into Europe society, the minority Europe on Eastern Tigray, they have this different way of looking into this justice system. You have this, for example, the Irk Enderta in the areas of Enderta, where the elders come together and serve some of the disagreements within individuals or within even groups and so on and so on. So in line of Qadamawian and Kalawian, or first Wayane and second Wayane, I would say the first Wayane had some feudal and also some Tigrayan values and assets, but I wouldn't say the second Wayane, because the second Wayane was totally led by Marxist-Leninist ideology. So it has nothing to do with our society. Yes, they have incorporated, for example, when they have this Kifl Hizbi, or the public relations, or the cadres, what we call them now, when they were engaging with the society, yes, they use some values and assets of the society while approaching it or while solving some issues. But these were just, at the bottom level, and it was just a kind of manipulation to go deep into the society. Yeah, ideologically, they were Marxists, they were Leninists. They still are, in fact. They call it revolutionary democracy, but when you look into their economic and political program, they are totally Marxist-Leninists, and that's what, in fact, one of the US envoys last time called them modern Bolsheviks. So there you have it.
Okay, so you're saying the third Wayane is going to be social democracy. We're going to be following the social democratic kind of concept for the third Wayane, which is okay. That's something that's we have to digest, I guess, because we have been jumping from ideology to ideology. So do you not think that there's a type of ideology that could completely catch the sentiment of the Tigrayan people in an authentic way? That's not concept that's adapted from the West, maybe?
We are not just saying that social democracy fits into what every aspect of Tigrayan society should live or what it looks like. What we are saying is we wrote down our aspirations for the Tigrayan people, for Tigray, what we have for Tigray. And when we have to choose an ideology, we just chose the next best that fits to our document. We didn't choose social democracy first and then write down what we think of Tigray and then fitting into this ideology. We didn't do that. We just wrote what we think is good for Tigray, and then the next best alternative as an ideology, because we have to choose an ideology. If you are a political party, you should have an ideology. Otherwise you are going to be a populist and pragmatist, which is hard even to control sometimes. For example, when you look into Eritrea, they say they are pragmatists. So, and it will fall in the hand of one person because he can go from east to west in one day because he is an individual. He has no guiding principles. What we are saying is we wrote down what we think is good for Tigray. And the next best alternative to choose from the ideologies that we have in the global world is social democracy fits better, not all what we call it, everything does not fit to one basket. So that's what we are saying. Social democracy is only an alternative. We are not saying we will experiment or we will execute everything the social democrats say. For example, in social democracy, in the most developed social democrats, there is a welfare system. We can't have welfare system. What we are going to introduce is health and education is going to be our priority, for example. That's what we are saying. Health and education, if you have a healthy, productive, and highly skilled labor, you are going to be productive. And this will help to the private sector. And the private sector, once you supplied him with healthy, productive, and skilled labor, they are going to be more profitable. And if they have more profits, they are going to pay more. If they are going to pay more, we are going to have a better society. So it's just a kind of a cyclic progression, I would say. So we will not impose what the social democrats of the international community are saying on our society. We will not do that.
Okay, interesting. So how does that fit in? Okay, the kind of the policies that you spoke about, for example, in health and education, how does that fit in within Ethiopia? What kind of federal system needs to be there for you to have these kind of policies in place in Tigray? Ones that are not completely constrained by the federal government. For example, as we have seen in the last few years, we have people who have not been paid, federal government workers who have not been paid for the last 2 years. We have an economy that's completely reliant upon contraband and things that are, aid. So how are we going to establish a society that is completely self-reliant in the way that you spoke about, whilst existing within the state of Ethiopia?
Well, when we were writing this document, I'm going to discuss about what we think of the future. But when we were writing this document, what we proposed for Ethiopia was there should only be a very loose federation. The constitutions that we have now, the experience that we have now over the last 30 years in Ethiopia, it's not an experience of a federation. It's just a unitary state. In fact, that's the legacy of revolutionary democracy. But the revolutionary democracy centralizes everything. Each and every sector of society has to be controlled by this centralist political party, EPRDF, what we call then. So our proposal was, let's lose this federation and let's regions have autonomy on their policies, on their health policies, on their education policies, in fact, on all of the economic aspects. The federal government should only control maybe the military, the diplomacy, the intelligence, the import-export tariffs, and the regulations, and probably the federal highways. That's what we would propose to the Ethiopian constitution, because what we said, well, we will have 3 phases of this losing the federation. First is scrapping what the PRF was doing unconstitutionally, through the political party, because the political party was bigger than the state itself. So the political party decides each and every fate of the regional governments. So what we said was, let's first dismember what the PRF was doing. Let's decentralize the political party itself. So let's fight on that. One. Second is, the federal government took a lot of power from the regional governments unconstitutionally through proclamations and directives. So what we said is, let's abolish these proclamations and directives. For example, land was the property of the regional governments, or it falls under the jurisdiction of the regional governments. But in many cases, land was being given to the federal government as to help them as a custodian, you might say. So it is against the constitution. So what we were saying is scrapping the constitution the proclamations and directives that are against the constitution. The third phase would be amending the constitution itself, decentralizing the constitution itself. Then we will have a real federation. What we had over the last 30 years was not a federation. It was just a unitary state, but comprised of some regional governments. There was no regional government which has its own autonomy or which can do what? No. For example, you can see into the PRD policy, agricultural-led industrialization. This was a prescription for each and every regional government in Ethiopia, not only for the Tigrayans who have more comparative and competitive advantage, for example, in tourism, in mining, in industry, in service, but also even to the Afaris and to the Somalis who have nothing, in their agricultural economies. For example, yes, they have some livestock resources, but they don't have even land to till. They don't get enough rainfall. So why would you propose or why would you impose an agricultural-led development into Afar and Somali, and in fact into Tigray? Why? It's not our competitive and comparative advantage. So what we are saying is we didn't have a federation. What we were proposing was a real federation, a loose federation. And then the second political aspect of this was, Arat Kilo or the Addis Ababa has come as the main distribution center of power and resource in Ethiopian politics and in Ethiopian. Though it is a federation, but still 70% of the wealth of the Ethiopian state and the people is centralized in this area. So what we were proposing at the time was, let's decentralize power and resource into the regions. In fact, not only into the regions, because the regions also has to decentralize their power and resource into waradas and to locals. These were our proposal during our establishment. Now we have a different scenario because we had a genocidal war, and now we have a big problem with Ethiopia. So what we are saying is we are not seeing the future of Tigrayans within the Ethiopian context, whatsoever the framework might be. So what we have now is different, but we will come up with a different proposal. We will write down the document. We will, submit it into the Congress, and hopefully we will have a green light to go with that document. But for now, what we decided as national leadership, for example, is we don't see the fate of the Tigrayans under the Ethiopian status in whatever arrangement it might be, whether federation, confederation, or unitary. We just don't see it. We don't see the interest of the Tigrayans being respected or being honored within this state. So this is what we are saying now.
Okay, so in order to achieve that, in order for the separation or the succession, the right for succession even to be achieved, does it not need to is there not a need for you as a party to be involved within the Ethiopian political environment, for you to be able to engage with the Ethiopian government, to be able to trigger some of the things that are constitutionally possible and constitutionally our democratic right? So how do you plan on doing that? How do you plan on engaging with we've seen that the government of Tigray, the TPLF, are now engaging fully with the Ethiopian government. So why is there a taboo in maybe the other opposition parties fully engaging with the Ethiopian government in order to advance the agenda that they believe is the right agenda for the people of Tigray?
Well, in the first months or probably a year after our establishment, we have been trying to do this. We have been approaching a lot of political parties and political elites in Addis Ababa and other regions, pursuing our national interests, in fact. So this was prior to the war. After the war, let alone discuss politics in Ethiopia, we couldn't even go out of our house, So over the last 2 years, we were under house arrest, most of us. Some of our comrades have been disconnected because they are in Tigray. Some of them have joined the armed resistance. So we couldn't. political dialogue and negotiations have been a luxury anyways for any Tigrayan who lives in Addis or who, well, the government in fact also, I think, ordered to the National Electoral Board to exclude us from any events and activities within the Ethiopian politics. So this was a problem. Now we will be back into the engagement, because whether we like it or not, we are here. We are in the Ethiopian Federation. I don't know how long it will take, but as long as we are here, we are going to engage. But as you were saying, the TPLF and the Tigray regional government, as we might call it now, is under quotation, because I don't see, because they have already demolished their government under the Pretoria Agreement. So I don't know whether we call it a government or not. So they have the luxury and the privilege to go and discuss even with Satans, because they were given all the benefit of doubt from the Tigrayan society. When you, as an opposition, try to do that, the accusations, the blackmailing, the character assassination, it's huge, it's immense. We have been defamed, we have been blackmailed, a lot of things have been done over the last years. But now, whether we like it or not, we are part of the Ethiopian Federation for now. Until we have a referendum and the Tigrayan society decides its fate, we are going to engage in the Ethiopian politics. We are going to engage in the Ethiopian Federation. So I think we are going to do that, and we are starting to do that as well. But we have to know our society well. The TPLF has been given all sorts of benefit of doubt. They have been privileged, but the opposition has been, stripped of these rights.
Yeah. So on that topic, I mean, I guess there has been a different level of sacrifices made by all political parties. For example, the TPLF, we go back to them leading the struggle of the people of Tigray in before the 90s when they came into power. And do you not think that this is some of the sacrifices that you are now making as a political party in order to be able to be prominent and in order to be able to gather that social capital within Tigray? So you definitely are going to have a lot of pushback, but is this not part of that same sacrifice made by that party, made by the first party, that you are now going through, but in a different system, in a different process, in a more modernized kind of environment, I guess? I mean, just a reflection, I guess.
Well, I wouldn't say that we are making sacrifices to get social capital. What we are doing is what's right for our people. The TPLF, yes, prior to 1991, it was a social movement, but it was hijacked by an ideological fanatic group who, when we go back into the armed struggle of the 1980s, you have this a front. TPLF is a front, Tigray People Liberation Front, even its name is a front. There were nationalists and there were these ideologue fanatics. At the end of the 1991, the ideologue fanatics hijacked the Tigrayan armed resistance, and they went on to establish the political party in 1995 after the constitution was ratified. So I don't acknowledge or I don't give recognition that the TPLF, the current TPLF is the TPLF that has led the armed struggle. The current TPLF is a political party established under the constitution, and their only source of power should have been, the reality is different, but it should have been the ballot box. You would, promise something for 5 years and the public would give you their confidence, and then if you deliver, you will be given another 5 years, or your contract will be extended. In reality, the TPLF is still with its arm. The TPLF is still with its. In fact, it added the state machinery over the last 30 years. The state machinery is under its control. the society, the party, and the state has been totally mixed, and it has been different to differentiate between these actors, the society, the state, and also the party. What our main objective was, for example, what we said when we established the party was, for 5 years we are going to only invest on detachment. The TPLF must be detached from the Tigrayan society and its previous armed resistance. The current TPLF is different than the previous TPLF. In fact, we were approaching a lot of people, including those of now who have retired army generals and so on and so on. We were telling them, in fact, TPLF should have changed its name in 1991. Look, even EPLF, the Eritrean ruling party, has changed its name when it stopped the armed resistance. The TPLF is exploiting the armed struggle for its political cause now. What we were saying is, let's detach this. Let's give the reality to our people. The TPLF that that your children and your family members have sacrificed over the armed struggle period, this is a different TPLF. In fact, this is a clique, we might call it. This is an interest group now. This is a political party. It has its own interests. It has a political program. It is only loyal to its program and to its members. It is only accountable to its members, not to the Tigrayan society. This is the main objective of our political party for 5 years. This is what we said when we established it. And then in 5 years, we might have, in additional 5 years means, we might have some ground for social base or social capital that we were saying. And in 10 years, we might be a contending force. That was our initial plan. So the Tigrayan society is caught in the middle of all these things. There are enemies, that's obvious. But the TPLF is also one of the most manipulative forces of our time. They manipulate the public sympathy, the affiliation the public had with this armed resistance group that was back in 1991 and prior to that. I say sometimes, the Tigrayan society has a blood and bone affiliation with the TPLF. We know that. Let's detach it. TPLF is just a political party. We have to stress on that. Otherwise, we are not going to be open even to change, because some of them, it's their legacy. For some of them, it's a nostalgia. For some of us, it's an affiliation, a sympathy, a lot of things. Let's treat TPLF as a political party. Let's see it as what it is. It is just a political party. If we cannot buy that, I don't think we will have a democratic transition in Tigray. It might lead us into even a violent way of transition.
Okay, so I think that leads on to one of my other thoughts that I had, which was, there was a public meeting in Meghalaya, I think last year in 2022, that Salsai Wayana had an issue with security, coming and closing that public meeting, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was around May. And we have seen the same kind of events taking place, for example, last week with another political party in Tigray. The attachment, like you said, the attachment of a political party with other institutions within the state, which is within the region, such as the police force, the judiciary, in terms of other social sectors as well. Is that an issue or limitation for political parties to thrive and grow and actually be able to engage in a lot of grassroots movement in order to get that social capital in the first place? Is that something that has been a limitation for you guys? Well, it clearly has, but in terms of that being a limitation, that I guess would come down to the checks and balances of the state as it is. There's no checks and balances to be able to allow other political parties to thrive. So in this case, in an already entrenched kind of environment, how do you maneuver in a way that does not offend hardliners, that does not offend those who attach the sentiment, for example, with the party? And how do you, again, try to, engage with the people on a grassroots level in order to gain more social capital? Because without social capital, you will never actually be able to change or, implement some of the policies, the great policies that you've been telling me about. So how can you engage those that do attach that sentiment to the party?
Well, I don't think there is an easy solution to that, but our plan was to, as I said, to detach and to tell the reality to the Tigrayan society. Yes, they had their own good story. Yes, they had won the war against the Derg, but look where we are now. Look what they have done over the last 30 years. Look their political program. Does it benefit you? And our main focus was, for example, over in the first 1 year was on the elite. Salsawiyan Tigray was focusing mainly on the elite. Let's have elite consensus. TPLF is just a political party. That's what we said. As you were saying, not to offend the hardliners or the those who have nostalgia on the legacy. It's hard not to offend them because they take everything for granted, as if TPLF is the only political party that should ever exist in Tigray. But some of them understand. Some of them have been, in fact, as the receiving end of the repressive regime. Their struggle has been hijacked by a small clique. Their sacrifices has been hijacked. The Tigrayan society has been left to be impoverished for more than 30 years. 30 years is almost a lifetime. What we call it a generation. You can change, let alone 5 million, 6 million people, you can change an entire 1 billion society in 30 years. That's what we have seen in China. Have we changed it? What has changed in Tigray over the last 30 years? Almost nothing. Look, your cities, they don't even have infrastructure. But look what the other societies are saying about us. What's the program? What's the program saying about Tigray? The political program within the TPLF does not even have a word called Tigray. It's just a translation from the Amharic EPRDF program. They don't have anything for Tigray. They never had. They were just leading it, with intuition, not with plan, not with strategic goals, and nothing was there. This is what we were saying to the public, but to the hardliners, we were also saying that because it's our belief, because it's in our political program, that the armed struggle is one of the iconic historical events in this Tigrayan society. So we have to acknowledge that. In fact, what we have said is we are the only one who can continue the legacy of those nationalists within the TPLF who have been kicked out of the political party after 1991. We cannot, inherit an institution like the TPLF, but we can inherit the goals and the aims and the aspirations and ambitions of the nationalists who were within the TPLF and over the last 100 years. So what we're saying is, in fact, we can narrate, and we have been narrating it better than the TPLF itself about the armed struggle itself. Because we believe in it. Because we believe it's a historic milestone in our society. So what we are fighting is not against the armed struggle or not against the management within the armed struggle, but what we are fighting, what we are opposing is what the TPLF was doing over the last, especially after 1995, after the 1995 years after the constitution was ratified. They don't have any political program for Tigray. They don't have any economic program for Tigray. They were just building Addis and the surrounding because they believe the national question is over. That's what they said actually after they ratified the constitution. The national question in Ethiopia is over now. Now it's the question of the bread. That's what they said. We disagree on this. National question cannot be over. Whether you have a federation or a confederation, whatever it is, we can aspire for a nationhood. Isn't it a national question? It is a national question. So it's not hard to clarify these things in the Tigrayan society because everything has been mixed up, and even the elites, the academic elites, for example, when they compare political parties, they only compare what we say on the media or what someone told them in person or something like that. They don't compare even the political program of the parties. A party is loyal to its political program, and it's only accountable to its members. The checks and balances, especially when you're a government, has to be there. Meritocracy has to be there. The courts, the media, and so on has to be free. The civic organizations has to be free. We cannot just collide while the civic organizations, the media, the court, the militia, the police force are siding with one political party in Tigray. What we can do is, in fact, we gave 3 objectives to ourselves. One is awareness creation, because there is no awareness in Tigray. There is no consciousness in Tigray. Second is, creating our own social base, because there is no fertile ground, for us to have a social base in Tigray. And the third is, imposing our thoughts or, enlightening or, telling our thoughts what we think of for Tigray. So, especially as Salsarian Tigray, we have been saying that these 3 burdens has been on us. In fact, we, for example, demand the scholars to help us at least in awareness creation. Because sometimes we have to be politically correct because we are politicians. But we are forced to be politically incorrect because we have to create awareness within the society itself. This has to be the role of the media, the role of the civic organizations, the role of the scholars and academia and every other elite within our society. But no one was there to take the responsibilities, so we took it as well. This is what we told ourselves. That's what we have been practicing over the last 2-3 years. That's why sometimes we collide with some elements of within our society, because we have to be politically incorrect sometimes. Otherwise, there is not going to be any awareness.
So you're saying the lack of independent institutions, independent scholars, neutrality in the society is the reason why there is a lot of politically incorrectness within our political environment, because there is a gap there that you are being forced to fill. That's a point I can take on. So moving on to the transitional government, because this is what has been decided upon the Pretoria Agreement. We have seen that the opposition parties, including Tigrayan, have pushed back on the fact that there has been engagement with the government of Tigray, with the TPLF, and your parties upon the decision-making process to actually establish a transitional government. We have heard here and there that there has been a committee that has been established, which are predominantly more affiliated with the TPLF, to be able to make that decision for transitional government. Again, where is your stance on this? Do you want to have an engagement with the TPLF in order to be able to establish a transitional government? Do you guys want to be a part of that? Or are you outright rejecting the legitimacy of the TPLF to be able to create that transitional government itself?
Well, this is actually a continuation of what I was saying over the last in this discussion. It's a sickness of control, a sickness of monopoly, a sickness of mistrust. The TPLF cannot let any organization or committee to be independent. What we are, for example, we might not be part of the whether we call it interim or transitional government, we might not be part of it. But what we are saying is at least the process has to be inclusive. At least there has to be clarity. Let's have a roadmap. Where do we start and where do we end? What are the objectives? What they did was they had their own infighting for almost a month. They closed their own rooms and they had their own fightings. They had their own disagreements, and then they have their own agreements, either coerced or willingly. They had their own agreements. And what they are saying is that we are going to impose this internal agreement between the military commissars, and we call them political commissaries, and then the cadres or the political party itself. And then they include some pseudo academicians within this arrangement. So what they are telling us, in fact, it's not a hearsay. They have already issued a statement yesterday. So what they are saying is, you can come or you can leave it. It's just like that. We have already crafted the roadmap, how we go forward. So you can come. If you don't like it, you might not come. We don't care. That's what they are saying. And what we are saying is, the end goal, whether we are part of the interim administration or not, doesn't matter, in fact. What we are saying is, let's first sit down and let's first craft the procedure, the process. It has to be inclusive. And then we will talk about the end goals and on the shares of the political forces in Tigray and other institutions, in fact. What they are saying is, now we control the whole process, so we will include you in whatever way we want to. And what we're saying is, no, this has been the practice of the TPLF over the last 30 years, and we are not accepting it. We are not falling for it. For example, during the election, if you remember, we had a lot of pressure to be part of the election, not only to be part of the election, but when we were even amending the Tigray constitution, we had a lot of fight inside the political parties forum. The TPLF resisted, to have this mixed parallel and mixed proportional alternatives that we had proposed over the time. The diaspora, for example, blamed us for not, joining the parliament that has been established after the election. No, we didn't agree on the process. We told them that let's have mixed proportional. They said, let's have mixed parallel. And we agreed on the merits and pros and cons, you might call it, on the pros and cons of these two options. We won 3-1 over the votes. But what they said to us was, the House of Representatives of the regional government is in our hands. We can, ratify whatever proclamation we want. And then they just went through that. After the election, a lot of the diasporas especially were confused. They thought that the 20% from the election was going to be given to the opposition political parties. We said, and we in fact briefed to a lot of people. For example, I even personally wrote it on my Facebook page that the Tigray regional Council made a historic mistake because they ratified a constitutional amendment that was not to the best interest of the Tigray and to its democratization. That's what has happened during the election time. And then when they saw that the election cannot be sold, let alone to the international community, that we were aspiring, that we want to be a democratic society, it cannot even be sold to their members, to their supporters in the diaspora. So what they did was, after the election, they brought some proposal that the parties be part of the regional council without vote. Look, their joke is endless, So the only political party that rejected that proposal was our party. Sub-Saharan Tigray rejected it. They sent elders, prominent individuals to lobby us to join the parliament. No, we said no. You don't change the rule after we played the game. We have played the game. We have argued before the game what rules we should set for the game. But they said no. After the game, there is no rule. You just only, execute what has been done. So they are also saying the same thing now. And let me say this again to the diaspora, to the Tigrayan society in large. What they are doing is what they have been doing over the last 30 years. What they are doing is what they have done during the election time. They, close their rooms, they discuss, they have their own infightings, and they agree on some things, and they impose on our society. They impose on our political parties. We are saying enough is enough. We, as a political party, for example, our party said enough is enough in 2020. We are saying the same thing now, but now I think we are not going to be alone. For example, TIP has joined us this time. They are saying enough is enough. They have issued their statement. Hopefully, we will continue that way. This will not, help us in going forward, in democratizing Tigray. If we are going to have a democratic Tigray, it's not only the end result that matter. It's also the process that matters most. If we can agree on the process, I don't personally care, for example, about the shares of the political parties within the interim administration. That's what we have been saying, for example, for the last 1.5 years. When we proposed for a transitional government some 13, 14 months ago, I was at the receiving end of all the insults and the character assassinations because I was online most of the time because I live in Addis. What I was saying is, look, they were saying that I am a power monger. And look, I'm not going, even if there is going to be a power sharing agreement in Tigray, I'm not going to be part of that power sharing because I am in Addis. I cannot go to Tigray and have an office. This is not personal. This is not a party issue. This is not a party interest. This is a societal interest. And if we are going to be on the right direction towards democracy, towards open society, I think the process matters most. And what they are saying is through their, as they say for themselves, for example, Kebede would say for themselves that they were arrogant and ignorant over the years. I thought they would change, but old habits die hard, as they say.
Okay, so I think what I got from what you said is that you don't want to be a part of the process after the process has been created. You want to be the ones to be able to create that process, to be able to create the roadmap as a society, rather than it being monopolized by a certain political party, whereas that's Axumawian, TIP, or TPLF. It has to be a consensus kind of agreement to even create that roadmap in the first place. And I think what you said about being able to be principled and the kind of things that you stand for, I think that's very commendable. But is that going to be, this is going to be the very last question, I think, and to just end up our discussion here. But your decline to join the process, do you think that will be beneficial or not beneficial for creating that democratic process? do you not have to be on the inside to be able to change things internally? You rejecting it externally, would that not just leave it to be monopolized for a longer period of time?
We did not reject any process. We are not rejecting not to be part of the process. In fact, we are demanding to be part of the process.
But if the process has already taken place, is what you're saying, since you said to me that the roadmap has been created and you've been invited after the roadmap has been created.
After it's completed, we have nothing to say there. They are going to give us either 1%, 10%, 20%. Even if they give us 50%, it doesn't matter. What we are saying is each and every Tigrayan institutions, especially for now, because we cannot incorporate each and every individual into such kind of arrangements. But at least we have institutions, we have political parties, we have civic organizations. This has to be part of the process. That's what we are saying. But they said, now we have completed everything. We have crafted the road. So the only thing you have to do is just join us, and we will give you what we think is good for you. And we don't agree on that. And if you don't have the the leverage or the power that they have, for example, they have the guns now also. So that they are they are telling us that they have the guns and they can dictate whatever they want. They are dictating the terms, and we are saying that it shouldn't be like this. We are demanding that the process should be inclusive in the first place. They have already decided what's going to be given to Hailu Tigray, and whether it's going to be 50% or 1%, it doesn't matter for us. What matters most is the process. Let's have the process. And it will be also, by the way, an experience for a way forward to Tigray, for democratizing Tigray. It's not just about the power sharing or whatever it is. It's just about practicing democratic, engagements as well. You don't have the right, in fact, you don't have even the legitimacy to dictate terms in Tigray. Look, these people should have been now in question, in prison, some of them, because they have failed our society miserably. And they are still trying to dictate the terms of the future of our generations. We are not buying it. We will not fall for it. We will fight the good fight, and I think we will win. It's a matter of time, because dictators have no room in our century. I don't think the Tigray is going to be an exception. I don't think TPLF is going to be an exception. And we will defeat them. It's a matter of time.
Okay, thank you, Hailu. Thank you so much for our discussion. I think it has been very insightful. I have learned a lot about Hailu, and thank you for all the engagements that you've been doing, like I said previously, and even with being able to come on medias and express what your policies are, what your limitations are, and what the obstacles of your party are as well. It's very important, I think, for our society to know that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your insightful kind of take and perspective on everything. So thank you, Hailu. This is Hailu Kebede, the head of the Department of Foreign Affairs from Tigrayan. Thank you, Hailu.
Thank you, Melat, for having me. It has been a good night. It's your night time in Addis. So thank you for the opportunity to clarify on some of my party's stands. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Inside Tigray. We will be back next time with more topics and more guests.